Late last year in Shenzhen, an old friend shared a sobering reality. For 2 years, he ran a vacuum cleaner assembly factory in Vietnam's Dong Nai province. He spent 3 months trying to hire a single-line supervisor capable of reading technical blueprints and failed. In Dongguan, he told me, I make 1 phone call and 3 qualified candidates show up tomorrow morning. This is not an isolated anecdote. It is an expensive lesson written in capital expenditures. Today, we are skipping the geopolitical rhetoric. Instead, we are looking under the hood of the China+1 strategy by breaking it down into 3 mechanical components: the supply chain radius, the secondary supplier deficit, and hidden operational overhead. By examining these factors, it becomes clear why, in 2026, many executives are facing a harsh financial reckoning. What exactly is a supply chain radius? It is the geographical footprint within which a factory can source critical inputs, screws, motors, packaging, and tooling. Ideally, this exists within a 50-kilometer window. In Dongguan, a 50-kilometer radius contains 90% of the components needed to build a smartphone. This is an established operational consensus across the Pearl River Delta in the Yangtze River Delta. Electric vehicle manufacturers can source batteries, motors, and electronic controls within a few hours' drive. This density is the product of over 30 years of development, hundreds of thousands of factories, and generations of industrial clustering. Now look at Vietnam. Dong Nai, located just south of Ho Chi Minh City, has become a hotspot for relocated vacuum cleaner and furniture manufacturers. Yet, the screws, the motors, and even the raw plastic pellets must still be shipped from China. It is not a lack of political will. Vietnam simply lacks the foundational industrial cluster density. My friend noted that his factory could not even find a qualified local supplier for a standard spring, forcing them to order from Dongguan via ocean freight. While the shipping rates themselves were manageable, the lead time variability was crippling. When clients placed urgent orders, his factories simply could not accept them. Let's look at the unit economics. While Vietnamese factory wages are roughly 30% lower than those in the Pearl River Delta, the comprehensive manufacturing cost for Chinese enterprises operating in Vietnam runs 15 to 20% higher. This penalty heavily impacts ecosystem. Dependent sectors like consumer electronics, small appliances, and precision molding industries, characterized by fragmented bills of materials, high SKU counts, and frequent tool modifications. Without the component density of the Pearl River Delta, these operations stall. The 30% savings on labor are entirely consumed by hidden logistical friction. The core strength of the Chinese supply chain has never been cheap labor. It is cluster density, the ability to source 90% of a product's parts within 50 kilometers, deliver prototypes in 4 hours, and modify a mold overnight. This capability cannot be replicated by low wages alone, though anchor firms can partially transplant it through massive capital deployment. The mainstream economic narrative often frames China+1 as Western corporations fleeing Chinese manufacturing. That narrative misses the primary driver, Chinese manufacturers themselves. Facing domestic overcapacity and US tariffs, Chinese Tier 1 and Tier 2 suppliers are aggressively building plants in Monterey, Dong Nai, and Backjiang. Companies like Luxshare Precision, Sunny Optical, TCL Suit, and Yuan are becoming common fixtures in Vietnam's Backjiang and Bac Ninh industrial zones. Crucially, they're exporting the 50-kilometer radius model, for example. After Luxshare established its facility in Backjiang, dozens of Chinese mold, connector, and packaging suppliers set up shop nearby to maintain proximity. The ecosystem is not stagnating. It is being restructured under Chinese leadership. Manufacturing is shifting from centralized domestic clusters to overseas distributed networks, while operational control remains firmly with Chinese parent firms. While Western small and medium enterprises often stumble when moving to Vietnam alone, the localized micro supply chains established by Chinese anchor firms are showing viability. However, this does not mean any company can easily relocate. Replicating an ecosystem requires a massive anchor firm, companies with tens of billions in annual revenue and the market power to compel their suppliers to move with them. A standalone vacuum cleaner assembly plant lacks that leverage. In manufacturing, a secondary supplier deficit changes everything in Dongguan. A purchasing manager can find 5 to 10 competing quotes for almost any component, creating a clear buyer's market. In Vietnam or Mexico, finding even one qualified local supplier is considered a success. Without alternative suppliers, manufacturers lose all bargaining leverage. Consider infrastructure. During the frequent power outages in northern Vietnam in 2023, the state utility Vietnam Electricity (EVN) prioritized power allocation to industrial parks, housing major anchor firms like Samsung and LG, which account for roughly 20% of Vietnam's total exports. According to a 2023 Reuters report, Samsung's factory in Bac Ninh operates with a dedicated 110 kV substation explicitly guaranteed by EVN. Meanwhile, standard industrial parks share a 35 kV line and face immediate rolling blackouts when the grid is overloaded. This is not a matter of political favoritism. It is a direct reflection of an infrastructure investment gap. Why is 2026 the year of reckoning? Because 4 separate economic constraints are converging simultaneously. The first constraint, escalating labor costs in Vietnam. The Vietnamese government has proposed legislation to reduce standard working hours while raising the minimum wage, legally narrowing the cheap labor dividend by 2026. The second constraint, Mexico's two-step tariff implementation. In April 2024, a decree imposed temporary tariffs ranging from 5 to 50% across 544 HS codes covering steel, aluminum, textiles, plastics, and furniture for a 2-year duration. By December 2025, permanent legislation transferred 1463 tariff lines, including 316 items that previously enjoyed 0 tariffs, effective the 1st of January 2026, a move already catalogued by China's Ministry of Commerce, MOFCOM. Furthermore, July 2026 marks the expiration of the USMCA's automatic renewal, triggering an annual review process that will likely tighten rules of origin. If local content ratios fall short, standard automotive and manufacturing tariffs will return. The third constraint, preemptive tariff risks in Vietnam. Vietnam's exports to the United States hit a historic record of nearly $107 billion in 2024, while electronics comprise the majority. China. Transshipment categories like textiles, furniture, and solar panels account for over $20 billion between 2023 and 2024. U.S. Customs and Border Protection significantly stepped up enforcement against circumvention via Vietnam. Given Vietnam's inclusion on the U.S. Treasury's currency manipulator watch list, a Section 301 investigation could be the next step. By 2026, Vietnam faces a triple squeeze: rising labor costs, escalating tariffs, and power deficits, hitting its bottleneck even faster than Mexico. The fourth constraint, unresolved infrastructure bottlenecks. Peak load power curtailments in northern Vietnam can reach up to 30%, according to public statements by EVN. Power grids remain constrained through 2024 and 2025, and EVN has already issued shortage warnings for the 2026 dry season. In northern Mexico, industrial states continue to see rising costs for water, electricity, and private security through 2025-26, while worker commutes routinely exceed 60 kilometers. When Samsung entered Vietnam in 2008, its local procurement rate was virtually zero. 15 years and $22.4 billion in cumulative investment later, a network of over 200 local suppliers has matured across northern Vietnam. But this is strictly an anchor firm playbook. It requires a multinational generating tens of billions in revenue, with the leverage to demand supplier relocation, the capital to build dedicated 110 kV substations, and the economic weight to secure top-tier power priority from EVN. If a small or medium enterprise relocates an assembly workshop while keeping its upstream components tied to Dongguan, Sixi, or Kunshan, it isn't diversifying risk. It is merely exporting costs. Samsung proved that supply chain ecosystems can be built, but it also proved that only anchor firms have the scale to build them. China faces its own domestic structural headwinds. Its working-age population, ages 1659, stood at 858.16 million in 2024, representing a 1.0% year-on-year decline and marking the third consecutive year of contraction, according to China's National Bureau of Statistics. An aging demographic, a shrinking aggregate labor force, and rising environmental compliance costs are undeniable realities. However, these domestic challenges are incremental, progressing at 1 to 2 percentage points per year, giving enterprises a window to adapt. Conversely, a sudden power failure in Vietnam, a missing supplier network in Mexico, or a USMCA tariff renegotiation represents an acute operational trauma that hits from day one of production. Between chronic structural shifts and acute operational trauma, the latter is far more frequently underestimated because it rarely shows up in an initial corporate pitch deck. When presented with a pitch deck advocating for China+1 risk diversification, executives should enforce two strict analytical rules. Rule 1. Evaluate overseas expansion by supply chain radius, not wage differentials. Assess how many critical components can be sourced within 50 kilometers, how many alternative suppliers exist per category, and the frequency of unplanned annual power outages. The product of these three metrics yields the true unit economics. Paper savings on wages are quickly wiped out by bloated inventory buffers and factory downtime. Rule 2. Recognize that China+1 is a supply chain reconstruction project, not a factory relocation. Samsung secured anchor firm privileges and stable power because it transplanted an entire ecosystem backed by $22.4 billion. If your organization has tens of billions in revenue and the leverage to bring its tier 1 suppliers along, the strategy is highly viable. If you are operating a standalone assembly plant while relying on the Pearl River Delta for upstream components, you are not mitigating risk. You are inflating structural costs and absorbing tariff volatility. To accurately project profitability, corporate financial models must pivot to a comprehensive calculation. Total landed cost equals factory gate cost plus operating premium plus tariffs plus hidden costs. Operating premium, add 15 to 20% for Vietnam. Add 50% or more for Mexico tariffs. Factor in 25% plus for direct China shipments, origin compliance costs for Vietnam, or USMCA renewal parameters for Mexico. Hidden costs quantify inventory buffers, downtime losses, compliance enforcement, and traceability system overhauls. In 2026, the true financial assessment requires calculating the sum of all four components, rather than looking at operating costs in isolation. The true mode of China's supply chain is the industrial cluster density refined by millions of factories and generations of workers over several decades. It cannot be easily replicated by low wages, while Chinese anchor firms are successfully exporting this capability globally. Western SMEs entering these markets independently are frequently discovering costly operational pitfalls. As we progress through 2026, more chief executives who sign 5-year industrial leases will be forced to recalculate their strategy at the board level. The analytical model must mature from a simplistic comparison of labor versus operations to a 3-dimensional equation balancing total landed cost, ecosystem compatibility, and anchor firm capability.